Hello there, very good day and welcome to this special edition of Insight. Today we want to examine a couple of issues, particularly dealing with the March 2nd general and regional elections and what obtained after and what is currently happening. As you are aware, Guyanese would have voted on March 2nd, 2020. The nation was made to wait for 5 months, yes, 5 months before His Excellency Dr. Irfan Ali was sworn in as president and his government could have begun work. Now, the question has always been asked, what has happened over the last 5 months that prevented a swearing in? As we know, traditionally, within a matter of days of an election, the results are declared and the government is sworn in, whoever wins the elections. We know what happened on March 5th. We know what happened on March 13th. When Claremont Mingo attempted to declare fraudulent results. We have seen a narrative out there that seems to be giving the impression as though nothing happened over that 5-month period, as though Guyanese voted on March 2nd, and they decided to wait for 5 months until the new government is sworn in. I have joining me today for this discussion the Honorable Bishop Juan Edghill. He is the Minister of Public Works, a member of the People's Progressive Party Civic, and of course, he is also a very active politician. Bishop Edghill, good day and welcome to the program.
Eddie, good day, and good day to all of your viewers and listeners, and glad to be able to share this time with you.
We are also joined virtually by Sanjeev Datadin. Sanjeev Datadin is a member of parliament for the People's Progressive Party Civic, and of course, he is an attorney at law. Sanjeev is, however, joining us virtually. Sanjeev, good day and welcome to the program.
Good day to you, Ed. Good day to your viewers and listeners, and of course, good day to Bishop.
All right, gentlemen, I want to get straight into today's discussion. And so we have gotten past the elections. We've gotten past the declaration and the swearing in of a government. Like I mentioned earlier, we knew what happened on March 5th and March 13th when Mr. Mingo attempted to declare fraudulent results. Two courts in Guyana would have declared those results null and void. And of course, as a result of the recount process, the very transparent recount process, we arrived at a declaration and Dr. Irfan Ali was sworn in on August 2nd. But what we've been seeing over the past few days would bring back memories of what Guyanese would have witnessed in the past. When it comes to elections and elections violence. And this is because Mr. Mingo, who the world saw committed a criminal offense as an electoral fraud, was held by the police, and the police through an investigation, and they're continuing their investigation. Bishop, I'll bring you in here. Your initial thoughts on what has been happening.
Well, Eddie, there are always consequences for criminal behavior. Even though those actions to bring to account criminal conduct may take time, there are always consequences for criminal behavior. We all knew that Mr. Mingo, acting with others, because clearly he could not have done that all by himself, produce fictitious numbers with an attempt to steal an election and to steal government. The vigilance, the militant stance, and the aggressive approach of the leadership of the People's Progressive Party Civic stalled that diabolical plan. We had the recount. The recount provided the evidence that Mr. Mingo, Mr. Lowenfield, and all those who participated in that criminal enterprise, what they were seeking to do by producing those fake numbers, we were vindicated that we won the election by 15,000 votes. Private criminal charges were filed against Mr. Mingo, but it is clear now the police have launched investigations, And if the police have launched investigations into fraud and misconduct, there's nobody in the country who's above the law. There's nobody in the country who can not cooperate with the police. And the police has held Mr. Mingo for questioning and others. It would appear that in the eyes of some people in Guyana, Mr. Mingo should be a hero who the police should not talk to. So they have moved to the courts twice in the last couple of days. My understanding, Sanjeev will probably give us all the legal moves. And they have been denied their requests, what they were seeking for. The police has made it public that Mr. Mingo this morning will be charged for several actions. Over the weekend, what we saw was vintage PNC behavior. More so yesterday, with that starting Belladrum, El Dorado, Paradise, then coming all the way down to Maikoni, with all of the protests and the people that were assembled out there in what could be best described as a carnival atmosphere, more of a party than a protest. But the end result was a shameless display of wickedness in high places. Are you trying to tell me that Mr. Harmon and all those who are encouraging and inciting and exciting those people to get out there to protest, starting with the first thing, Mr. Harmon used to be the head of the COVID-19 task force, while an election was being stolen and PPP supporters were outraged, the leadership of the PPPC acted responsibly, and we didn't amass our supporters across this country to protest because we wanted to ensure that the lives of our people are safe and well protected. Because Mingo is in custody answering to criminal charges and investigations, you're going to disrupt the lives and livelihood of a whole section of the Guyanese people by blocking the roads? This is vintage PNC. Anybody who read or lived through those days, anytime the PNC has lost an election, that is their behavior. 1992, 1997, and you could keep going. Every time they have to give up state power or they have lost an election, they get out there on a rampage to harm, hurt, and interfere with the peace of this country. So here you have the PNC seeking to show its muscles, so to speak. If you hold on to Mingo and you continue with these investigations and you hold on to the people at GCOM who were acting to give them a victory that they did not get. And that's the interest that Harmon and the PNC have. It's not Mingo, it's protecting their own interest, because whatever Mingo was doing was to give them a desired outcome. What they are afraid that Mingo will be able to say, this is the person who gives me this spreadsheet, or this is the person who told me to do this, or I sat in a room with these individuals who told me to do this, and Mingo will have to explain how Vola Lawrence's signature got in his first declaration, and then Carol Joseph's signature on the second declaration. Look who are the ringleaders, some of the same players. So this is vintage PNC, bullyism, bareface bullyism. They are bold in their wickedness. During the last period, until we were waiting to get the recount completed, and then after the recount, almost a month before the declaration, we were talking about the delusional state of the PNC, their lies, their fabrications, their deceit. Everybody have seen that. And still yet, as of today, in a shameless approach, you're going back to being the thugs on the streets, the bullies of the road. Might is right, and it's not reason and reasonableness. It's now might is right. But you know something? The world has advanced. The will of the Guyanese people and their maturity has so advanced that they will not allow thuggery, bullyism, and blatant might is right, move fire, slow fire, broke up the tongue approach to hinder Guyana's development. And all that the PNC and their leaders are trying to do with holding this country ransom, they will not succeed. They will not.
Bishop, I want to bring Sanjeev in here. And Sanjeev, you know, Bishop touched, and I touched as well on what happened between March 2nd and August 2nd. You were part and parcel of this process throughout. And we see what happened at the Ashmans building when Mr. Mingo attempted to declare fraudulent results. We saw what happened at the GCOM headquarters when, again, Mr. Mingo denied political parties the right to really review the SOPs, to see exactly that the numbers that he was calling, that those numbers were matching what was on the SOP. You've been through this process, Sanjeev.
Ed, it's like Minister Edghill was saying a minute ago. Do you know that these charges against Mingo were filed on the 13th of March? On the 13th of March, Mingo was under police protection. And still, the police did not serve him. They were protecting him. The court had ordered that it be served on him, the charges. And the police who had him in their protection apparently couldn't find him. Now, the end result of what happened is now that the police are doing an investigation. They were looking for Mingo for the past month. They found him last week. They were able to identify where he was, and they arrested him. His arrest has now, the police are doing their investigations. Now, what has happened at Belladrum is people are saying that he should be released. The court never ordered that he be released. The court said your time for holding him without charge would expire on Saturday. That's what the court indicated. The first application that they filed, which was for the habeas corpus, that was filed by Darren Wade. The habeas corpus was filed under the wrong provision of the Constitution. And our Attorney General, Anil Nadlal, had to explain that to him, that he filed under the wrong proceedings. So the court was not even empowered at that stage to release Mr. Mingo, having filed under the wrong provisions. But then the application to extend the period of 72 hours came before the judge. And the judge said, well, I'll give you until tomorrow at 2 o'clock to hold him without a charge. What happened before 2 o'clock was the police read the charges to Mr. Mingo that he would have to face. When those charges were read to him, the character of his detention changed. He was no longer a person who was not yet charged and in police custody. He was a person who was charged and in police custody, and the Constitution and the law says he must be taken after that charge at the earliest opportunity before a magistrate to answer those charges. So that's why he remained in detention. Now, Darren Wade filed another application, which was to have him released, which was dismissed, quite reasonably. We have to be fair and reasonable in these proceedings. For 5 months, you couldn't find him and there were charges pending. Another month went by before you were able to identify him. The police are well within their rights to say, look, we have found him, which is our job. We have charged him, which is what we were supposed to do. And we want to keep him in custody until we take him before a magistrate. And then the magistrate is free to give him bail. But he would have appeared before a magistrate and he would have pleaded, if necessary, to the charges. So he couldn't escape that anymore. Now, that is what the police were doing. It's not a happy stance that you simply say that what you want to do is you want to lock him up. It's not lock him up. He couldn't be found for 5 months. Didn't he know that the police were looking for him? Every news outlet, everywhere in the papers, this was reported. He could have attended the court. He could have attended court on his own and says, well, I understand it's their proceedings that concern me. He didn't do that. He sought to avoid the police. Then we have the most interesting thing of all, Ed, that I saw today. And we were wondering what was going on and who Mingo was associated with. Well, we saw who his lawyers were. But this morning, when Mingo was being charged and taken to court, and the court were hearing the proceedings, Mr. Granger, Mr. Harman, and Mr. Ramjatan were there. And they were there, and the three commissioners were there, now the opposition commissioners, they were there, and they were all waiting for him to be, his proceedings to take place, and for him to come out. Now, that is indicative. He's represented by persons who were on the list. He's represented by who is being self-declared as the presumptive opposition leader. Those people, Mr. Granger was the former president. Mr. Harman was a minister of government. So was Mr. Ramjatan. Now, these are the people who are his chosen representatives. And don't get me wrong, I believe you could choose the lawyer of your choice, yes, but it's indicative of the lawyers that have been chosen. They're lawyers who are not politically affiliated that would quite happily or quite capably represent Mr. Mingo. But again, he's entitled to the choice. Now, does anyone doubt after this recount was completed? Does anyone seriously doubt that Mr. Mingo fabricated numbers? I don't think that anybody who is reasonable or even sane would doubt that. And shouldn't he answer for it? This is not a political issue. Why would a man who the government pays, GCOM pays, and by extension it's the government funds, he is paid a salary to do a job. Why would a man take it upon himself to change these numbers, to thwart the will of the people, to deceive a nation and declare a winner of an election who did not win the election? No one is interested in why that happened. The people in Belladrum have no interest in why that happened, because it means that someone has hijacked the system. And we should have answers, and the courts are where the answers will be revealed. He's going to have the opportunity to lead his defense, and he's going to have the opportunity to say whatever he wishes to in response. But as Minister Edghill said, this is the norm, the slow fire, more fire of 97. The 2000, 2001 era of protesters on the streets every day. So now you've blocked the bridge at Belladrum. People can't pass. People can't go about their business. And it's not fair. Reasonable people don't react this way. We noticed that when 5 months were going on, and it was obvious that a rig was being attempted of the election, that false results were being proffered and submitted to GCOM to accept, we didn't see this happening. And it's not right that one side of the political divide believes that they can bully or impose their will on the other side simply because they don't like the result. That's not right. And as far as the Mingos or the Mingo scenario goes, he's charged, he's before the court, and the courts will adjudicate on what they have before him. There will be evidence produced, and he will have a right to defend himself.
Much, Sanjeev, and both Minister Edghill and yourself touched on a couple of very important issues there that we have to examine. But I want to take you back, Minister, to what happened, because the reality is that you had a nation that was held hostage for 5 months. You cannot discount that fact. You cannot discount the fact that the results that were being put forward by Mr. Mingo and Lowenfield and the others weren't reflective of the will of the people, which we saw coming out in the recount. But there seems to be this narrative that is being peddled by many, particularly in the coalition, now in the opposition, as though Mr. Mingo did nothing wrong, as though nothing ever happened. How do you respond to that?
Eddie, I represented the PPPC during the recount from day one in Region 4, where Mr. Mingo made his fraudulent declaration. If you still have people who believe that Mr. Mingo did nothing wrong, these are people who are prepared to destroy their consciences, or like the old people would say, have cockroach eat out their conscience. Mr. Mingo was declaring numbers more than voters. Mr. Mingo was subtracting votes that were allocated to the PPPC and adding votes that the PNC never had. The votes were not in the ballot box. And they were bringing the same bullyism into the counting stations when those matters were being revealed. Mr. Granger, who said he believes in integrity, decency, and honesty, showed up this morning, according to what I'm getting from my learned friend here, because he knew that Mr. Mingo's wickedness and deception and mischief was to benefit him. And for 5 months, they destroyed businesses. Forget about COVID-19 and the compounding of the electoral impasse with COVID-19. Had we had early resolution to the electoral impasse and that rig was not attempted, the businesses that can't pay their rent, the people that are on the breadline, the economic hardships that people are going through would have been long dealt with and abated. We are now trying to put a budget in place almost 6 months after the election. This country could have been moving. It is Granger and Harmon and the cabal, Lowenfield and company in GCOM and the 3 commissioners who represented them, with all of their spin doctoring and mischievous garbage that they were uttering on a daily basis to confuse the minds of Guyanese people, that placed this country in such a difficult situation. Now an investigation is going on and you're trying to behave like if nothing happened. Mr. Mingo was taken to court. And you know why he was taken to court? Because he was breaking the law. He was not using statements of poll. If Mr. Mingo did nothing wrong, all Mr. Mingo had to tell the police, look, here are my statements of poll, or Mr. Mingo still have the option tonight that he's now on bail. Publish copies of the statements of poll that give him the numbers that he declared for APNU on 2 occasions. Mr. Granger could do that to help Mr. Mingo and show the Belladrum people and the rest of the Guyanese that Mr. Mingo is a decent, righteous Christian man who did his job with uprightness and did nothing wrong. Just publish the statements of poll. But every time you talk about statements of poll, you get a whole segment of the people who say, we don't want to hear anything about that. Because these are people who are desperate for power. They wanted to steal an election. They probably did it in 2015, because if we get the election petition of 2015 heard, we might be able to prove to this nation what really transpired in 2015. And they tried it again in 2020, got caught. But I believe the noises in the street is not just about Mingo. Mingo's public action is as a result of private, secret discussions, agreements, and positions. And that group who met in that PNC war room that says, we got to get this done in order to get the victory. Mingo will be the person who will deliver for us. And like Sanjeev said, those who were part of that wicked, mischievous, diabolical plant, they showed up in defense of Mingo today because they're actually now trying to protect their own interests. So there is no way that you could tell even a kindergarten student in Guyana that Mingo, bingo, lingo numbers were not wrong. Everybody knew. The recount showed every box that came in, photographed the condition it came in, the seals cut. The numbers were never in the box. And that is why you had to have a recount. Because a recount was to check to see if what was declared matches what was in the box. They can't come now and say the boxes were stuffed, the boxes were compromised. Mingo must tell this nation what he did with the documents that he instructed that the presiding officers don't put in the boxes but deliver to his office. The same statutory documents that Harmon and Aubrey Norton and all of them were talking about. He is the custodian as the returning officer of those documents. And they're trying to say that Mingo did nothing wrong? And you want to burn a country down because the man who fronted for a cabal, because that is what Mingo did. Mingo, as part of the rigging machine, fronted for a cabal. But if you want to know who was part of the cabal, just look who would have been the beneficiaries. Granger would have become president. Harmon would have held high office. Basil Williams and Valda Lawrence and Amna Ali and all of them were going to be the big wigs in the country. So Mingo was doing something for their benefit. I'm not sure what he personally benefited out of that. So the reality is, you do the crime, you got to face the music. There are consequences. Don't tell me he's an old man now, you got him in police custody, why you going to lock up an old man? But when he wasn't an old man to go and do that kind of mischief. If you sign up for that kind of a mischief, you must know that your age is a factor. If you sign up for that kind of mischief, you must know your health is a factor. If you sign up for that kind of mischief, you must know you got a wife, you got children, you got grandchildren is a factor. If he had gotten through, he would have been a big boy. But the militants and the vigilance and the aggressive leadership that was provided by the PPPC in this whole environment stalled and stopped and prevented that rigging machine. The issue is, Eddie, and we have to make it clear, it's time for Mr. Mingo to answer in a court about his actions and let the court decide if he was guilty or not guilty. It is at the court he will answer the questions that he didn't answer to us when we asked on television. It's at the court he will be able to vindicate. I'm a decent public servant who did my job. And he'll be able to explain to the court how he got those numbers. He'll be able to explain to the court how he got that spreadsheet. He'll be able to explain to the court why Valda Lawrence signed that document with him and where that document was signed, if it was at Ashman's building or it was at Congress Place. He'll be able to dictate to the court through his lawyers when he's making his defense all the questions that the people of Guyana currently have as unanswered questions of why he did what he did. So what is wrong about him facing the court to vindicate himself? Let's say there are people in the PPPC, and I'm not saying that, but they want to say there are people who are wicked and they're trying to create confusion by holding on Mr. Mingo. The court is the place to vindicate him. Let him go to court and vindicate himself and vindicate the cabal. But they all know where this is going. You know, they filed an election petition to say that they won the election. What a joke. But Mr. Mingo is in court the same day that they filed their election petition to say that they win, to answer to criminal conduct that would have given them a win. So they're trying to hoodwink and pull wool over people's faces and try to tell the people, man, you know, we really win, we get cheat. But the whole country know that Mingo was just fronting for them. And this is the reality. All what you see they're doing in the name of an election petition is academic and their exit strategy. Well, we're going to fight it out in court. But they know fully well they don't have a leg to stand on. They don't have a leg to stand on. And I take serious offense when I heard Mr. Harmon in front of Sparndam police station referring to the government as a fraudulent government, and he will not allow this fraudulent government to do this and interfere with people's rights. Mr. Harmon needs to hide his face in shame. I'm looking forward to seeing him tomorrow in Parliament. I'm looking forward to see how he will put on that straight, hypocritical face to come and say that the government is a fraudulent government when Mr. Harman was one of the men who was behind the biggest fraud this country has ever seen to steal an election. He was the one who was speaking. Concede to who and when and where? You remember all the bravado and all the talk that Granger don't have to concede any defeat to who and where. But the day when Mr. Granger realized that he can't go further because of what is all the revelations on the table, the whole thing collapsed. And now Mr. Harman has resurrected. I'm going to fight for people. We're going to give the PPPC a hard time. They're going to have a rough ride. And you were trying to steal an election? Well, Mr. Harman going to have a very, very rough ride, because I believe when Mingo start talking, he might very well end up where Mingo is now.
I'll come back to you, Bishop. I want to bring in Sanjeev here. And Sanjeev, Bishop made a point. You do the crime, you have to serve the time. Let us talk about this a little from a legal perspective. And Bishop went through a number of things. The process really, when it comes to the court, and one must allow that process to work.
Ed, this has been a mantra that we have said for a very long time. You have to allow the court process to work. In all the numerous challenges that were being filed, all the frivolous challenges that were only designed to waste time, to delay the process, when they were filed, we all had to allow the process to take its course. We had to allow the courts to adjudicate. Why should it be any different now? And it's like Minister Edghill just said. Isn't it odd that the coalition has now filed an elections petition? They are very likely to be the ones in that petition to produce the evidence that will cause Mr. Mingo to go to jail. Because I cannot imagine what explanation on God's green earth is possible when Mr. Mingo is going to say where he got those figures from. The recount, which was public, the recount which was done on Facebook, on television, on radio, I don't imagine that he will be able to persuade anyone that those figures that he had were not invented and they were not a fabrication of him and others who were associated with him. All of those persons are being charged now. All of those persons are being put before the court. Now, we have to allow the court to take its process. If these people, if the persons in Belladrum are saying that they should be the persons to determine who should be charged, who shouldn't be charged, who should go to court, who should go to court, what gives them that right? And why do they think that they can insist on that? This can't work that way. It could only work one way. If charges are filed, you must go to court, you must address those charges, you must lead your defense and let a court adjudicate. If perchance you're convicted, you have the right to an appeal. You can appeal all the way to the Caribbean Court of Justice. So what will happen, and the occurrence of what happened, is how civilized society deals with disputes. But you can't hijack the process and say, well, this person has done that, and the other person has done that, and we would not obey this, and we're not going to follow that. How could you disconnect from society in that way? Now, if Mingo has an explanation, we will all learn about it in court. If he does not have an explanation, then what he did to the nation of Guyana, he should pay for. The penalties that the law, the criminal statutes provide should be imposed upon him. He should not go free. And anyone else who is associated with that should similarly be brought to book. We cannot have this happen again. We, as every Guyanese know, when you go to the election, when people vote, there was so much public funds spent to ensure it was properly done. It was fair. There was so much public funds spent to pay people to do a job, to do their job. But why is it that people felt that they could simply abandon their job and attempt to con the people of Guyana and impose what they did not want, what was not the result? I don't think that any normal, sane, reasonable, rational person will accept that the recount of the results were not accurate. I think it was done publicly. It was done at Arthur Chung Center where everybody was present. They had the right to object. They had the right to make their observations. This was all done. But the end result is every ballot with an X was counted. And every person who put their X on a ballot, it was in the reckoning. Whether it was for the opposition, the government, the smaller parties, whatever it was, that's your right and that's your choice. But you cannot, having lost an election, proceed to burn the roads on the East Coast, proceed to stop people who want to go up or down to do their business, to stop people from going from Berbice into Demerara. That's not right. Why would you alone be entitled to that right as opposed to all of your countrymen who live in the same country you do? And if Mingo, you're objecting to Mingo being held in custody, he has to understand that there are rules and procedures. This was not done by the government. These things went to the court. The judge in the High Court decided that it was fair and reasonable that he remain in custody. The judge decided that he should not grant an immediate order for release. When it was filed again on Saturday, the judge similarly agreed that it was not appropriate that he make an order for release. But that's how it works. So this is not, you can't blame the police for doing this. You can't blame the government for doing this. You can't blame a minister for doing this. There was a dispute. The police said, we want to hold him to make sure he appears in court. His lawyers said, no, we want to file proceedings. They filed those proceedings. The court ruled on the proceedings, said, no, we agree that he should remain in custody until he's taken to court. Now that he's taken to court, he's lodged his bail, returning for the matter to be heard. Whatever defense he wishes, he is going to be afforded a full opportunity to lead that defense. As Minister Edghill said very clearly, we have to look very carefully as to what it is Mr. Mingo will say, who Mr. Mingo will say was involved or associated with what was going on, if he chooses to speak. But in the election petition, he wouldn't have any such right. Those are different proceedings from criminal proceedings. The character of it is different. The right to remain silent and those constitutional guarantees would be slightly different in those proceedings. I am very interested, as you well know, Ed, to find those SOPs that GCOM or Mingo had access to, and certainly what the coalition had access to say that they'd won. Now, they had said, and they filed a petition, they have to bring their documents. I'm sure that a court will reasonably order that they produce their SOPs, and they're going to have to decide what they're going to do in relation to that. But those are all matters that the court will ventilate. They will have full arguments. The court is going to hear both sides. The court is going to make an adjudication on what happens. But we can't say because you don't like it, or because you're not happy with it, or because you wished it were a different situation, that you abandon the process of the courts. How else would we settle disputes? Are we going to set it on, as they're trying to do in Belladrum, by burning the road, by burning things on the road, by burning vehicles and debris on the road? How would that work? And don't other citizens have a right? Don't they have a right to travel the road, to traverse, to go for whatever reason they want to go in Berbice or on this side? There are lawyers who practice in both counties. Colleagues of mine who can't get to court. They can't get from across that because the police are warning them about their safety. This is an untenable situation. We can't go back to what we did 25 years ago with slow fire, mo fire. That didn't solve anything. We can't go back. That's a retrograde step. The world has moved on, as Minister Edghill said. We have a result we have a president, His Excellency Dr. Van Ali is sworn in as the president. You're not happy, you file an elections petition, and you bring your evidence. Now, we've heard much about the evidence in the previous 5 months to the declaration about all the evidence we have. Now we may finally get to see it. Now we may finally get all of the SOPs and other evidence that they have. But Ed, we can't abandon the court system. There is no other way in civilized societies that disputes are settled. Now, there might have been, as everyone recognized during the 5 months, that the population have opinions, and some of it unfair, and some of it born out of ignorance, some of it born out of insecurity and fear, some of it might be founded. But there were all these complaints that everyone had about the judicial system and why constantly go to court. There were complaints and there were fears about the proclivities of judges. These are all fears that people are entitled to express within reason, and they should keep it within a respectable way that they do. But it's still the court system we have to go to. It is still a judge that has to go to. It doesn't matter whether you like the judge or not. The judge must be the adjudicator of the dispute. It doesn't matter whether you like the magistrate or not. That is the person who must adjudicate the dispute. And that's the foundation, that's the bulwark of our society. So we can't abandon the court system. We can't change the laws and change what we do for one man when that one man wanted to change the entire nation. I, speaking for myself, I want to know why. And I'm sure there are many like me who want to know, why did he do what he did? And what exactly did he do? And who were perhaps his co-conspirators or the people who were associated with him? We want to know. The nation deserves to know that. We must never, ever wait 5 months for an election result again. We must never go back to that.
Sanjeev, thank you there. But I want to ask you, because I think we're almost out of time, Minister, and I want to make the 2 points. One, that while we're looking at one side of the numbers that Mr. Mingo would have declared, and we're looking at the recount which prove the real numbers in the boxes, we have to recognize that 2 courts would have ruled that the figures presented by Mr. Mingo were null and void. But what is happening, and I want to take you down this path as the Minister of Public Works. What is happening at Belladrum are clearly criminal activities when you look at the statement released by the police, where they outlined that the protest was illegal. You had burning of debris on the road, you had blocking of the road. Thousands of people were denied the opportunity who would have traveled to Berbice and want to travel back to Georgetown, and vice versa. You could safely say the movement between Berbice and Demerara were at a standstill. How do we deal with this? And the question is, what exactly was said to the people in Belladrum? Because when you recognize who were the players and actors at that protest, you clearly see it is out of the playbook, like you said, of the PNCR.
Well, Eddie, there are 3 things that I would want to say. The police went into Belladrum based upon what the commander said publicly and engaged the residents and were talking with them on Saturday. On Sunday, you had a mass protest. So there might be need for us to examine what really transpired with the police and what kind of intelligence was gathered with the police. Number 2, Mr. Harman made certain public statements, and those statements are clearly linked to what transpired on Sunday. So it is not just family and neighbors and friends of Mr. Mingo who are aggrieved that he is locked up. These are political, managed, politically organized, politically sponsored actions that must be addressed. And basically, Eddie, in my own understanding, it is the PNC trying to exercise some amount of leverage, make the country ungovernable, so that the real investigation and the criminal pursuit of an investigation into this matter somehow disappear through some political leveraging. It was because Harman and the group knows exactly where this is going and how it will affect them. And then the third thing we need to address is the residents of Belladrum and West Berbice. Tell me, explain to your children, explain to your neighbors, explain to your friends how you benefited from yesterday. You had the liquor to drink, you beat your drums, you had a good laugh that the police can't move you, you eventually have to go home. How did you benefit? Can't you see that your leaders are misleading you? They told you they won an election. You saw that they were rigging an election, and that was eventually revealed. The world saw the riggers. Your countryman was part of that rigging. Wouldn't it have been more appropriate for the 500 or how many of you to come together and pool your resources together, $1,000, $100, $500, to make sure that Mr. Mingo get the best lawyer, that he don't have to be managed by political types that have, because all those lawyers that are defending him are political types who have an interest to protect. I even saw somebody put on Facebook, they put a work-study lawyer referring to Mr. Darren Wade to represent Mingo. Mr. Mingo don't need a work-study lawyer, he needs a proper lawyer. Wouldn't it have been better that you come together and put your resources to make sure that this man who you know all your life and you don't know him to be a criminal or a fraudster, get the best representation where he can tell his lawyer and not be politically handled to protect a political interest so that you could get an outcome that is satisfactory, but rather the same leaders who came and told you, number one, vote for us, and we're going to win and we're going to do A, B, and C for you, but they did nothing for you in 5 years. When you finished voting, they came back and told you, we won. On what basis they won? Fraudulent numbers that they get Mingo to declare for their behalf. For 5 months, they tried to spin a narrative, create confusion in the country, all the time you were suffering. Then they used COVID-19, and they told you, the residents of Belladrum and all of us in Guyana, don't have large gatherings, you can't get out to church, because lots of the people from Belladrum and West Berbice, they go to church. Church was shut down for 4 months. You can't go to parties, you can't go to horse racing. The PNC people who stood 10 feet apart to protest for Carter Center to come back during the recount, they were locked up and they were charged.
You mean the PPP?
The PPP supporters. Did I say something else?
You said the PNC.
Sorry. The PPP supporters who went down by Ministry of Foreign Affairs who were protesting, they got charged. And now the same people who told you that we got to do that because of health reasons are the same ones because their life is on the line, because exposure will affect them. They're forgetting everything that they told you. And they say, hey, we got to get it out here. We got to come together. We got to stop this. They're endangering you. You are just another pawn in their political game. Tomorrow morning, Mr. Harmon will put on a suit and with a bold face come to Parliament, and he will take the oath of office, and he already told you he's going to become the opposition leader. And you will be sitting there in Belladrum. Your faces are already known on camera, what you were doing yesterday. The roads that fall under my ministry that you burnt, we got to go and assess the damage. They will have to repair. The bridges that are damaged, we have to repair. Monies that could have been used for development of other things in your community will have to now be used to fix back those thoroughfares so that all Guyanese can benefit. And I'm asking you, this kind of irrational, insensitive, emotional, and misguided responses, how does it benefit you? No way. It is only propping up an image of a people who misled you, brought this country into a place of real damage. Because when you really examine what the APNU+AFC did from 2011, when they had that one-seat minority in Parliament, you are still paying expensive light bills because they killed Amalia. When your heart hurts you and you can't get the money to go overseas, you die from a heart attack, and you end up at Sandy's, Jerick, or somebody. They had big insurance to go to Ireland. They killed the specialty hospital that could have been able to bring real tertiary level health care. They damaged that. Your children are at a disadvantage. The jobs that you had, you don't have it. The kind of a development that you should have had, you didn't have it. In the oil, in the management of the oil, they practically give away Guyana. Took a $18 million signing bonus. When if a CEO of ExxonMobil resigns, or for some reason they don't want him anymore, his bonus at his exit will be about $100 million, and they give a country $18 million. That is the kind of people who led us. And now, for 5 months, they held us up, put neighbors against each other, divided this country. We were more fractured than we have ever been. And because they want to protect their own image and their own interests, they're using Belladrum. And Eddie, I thank you for the opportunity for being on this program, because they will have to continue, and they might move from Belladrum to another village, because they have to keep providing fig leaves to cover their nakedness. Because every time the police make an investigation into a matter and somebody gives a statement, the nakedness, the wickedness, the vulgarity, the mischievous behavior of that cabal will be exposed, and once it's moving towards them, they want to exercise some amount of political leverage. And this is what is dangerous to Guyana.
Thank you very much, Bishop. Sanjeev, we maybe have maybe about 2 minutes or so. I'll give you a chance to wrap things up.
Ed, it's important that we recognize a lot of what Minister Edghill was saying a minute ago. What purpose does it serve to do the things that's going on of blocking the road and burning the streets? It only takes away now that it will have to be fixed, and now money will have to be expended to repair that. And as the minister said, we have to be aware that those who are pulling the strings, as it were, who are leading these people, leading innocent people to go to do these things and to give of their time, to give of their effort. But we don't see that happening with those who are the rigging cabal. They will move on to the next thing. They will go on to Parliament. They will be members of Parliament. They are going to move forward. But we should not allow anybody, for any reason, to stop us getting to the answers of what happened with this election for 5 months. Why were the results so skewed? Why did Mingo and others believe that they were entitled to take away the will of the Guyanese people? What persuaded them? Who persuaded them? Why did they act in this way? These are answers that the nation deserves. And if it is that they're unhappy about the incarceration of Mr. Mingo and he's been held for too long, then they only have to look at what has happened, that it went before a judge, that a judge has made an adjudication. You have to respect that. You could have appealed it if you chose, but you must respect it. And we must respect the legal process for what it is. It might not be perfect, but it's what we have. And it is what should happen every time that there are problems like what Guyana experienced over the last 5 months. We can't do the retrograde, slow fire, more fire. No one benefits with that. Only the ones who are trying to cover up or conceal why this rigging took place and why people were motivated to try to rig these elections. Only those are the only beneficiaries, and they should not be able to escape justice.
Thank you very much, Sanjeev Datadin, Member of Parliament for the People's Progressive Party Civic, and of course, Bishop Juan Edghill, Minister of Public Works and member of the People's Progressive Party Civic. Gentlemen, I want to thank you for joining me today to have this discussion on the current developments. This was a special edition of Insight to discuss the situation in the country, particularly with what is happening at Belladrum in West Berbice, and as a result of the incarceration of Mr. Clement Mingo, who attempted on 2 occasions to declare fraudulent elections results. Gentlemen, again, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. Sanjeev, is always a pleasure to share with you.
And to our viewers, we want to say thanks for being part of the program. We can be back here at 5 p.m. with another edition of Insight. Until then, we encourage all of you to stay safe, practice social distancing, sanitize, and wear your mask if you're going to be among people. Until then, remain safe.